How's everybody doing? Welcome back to another episode of The Banker Next Door. I am your host, Dr. Joe Berquist. Today we are going to look at the 2024 Bank Director Talent Compensation and Talent Survey. Excuse me. So let's bring in let's bring this in real quick. So we're going to do two things here. We're going to look first. We're going to look at an article from Bank Director, just kind of highlighting a couple things about the survey, and then we're actually going to go in and take a look at the survey itself and basically just review kind of the key findings of the survey. So if any of you have watched the channel before, you know that I'm a huge fan of Bank Director. I love a lot of their articles and the stuff, and they run a number of different surveys throughout the year to chart, several different things, kind of risk, technology. So here we have compensation and talent. So let's take a look here at this first article here. So this is titled Compensation and Talent Survey, Developing Leadership Potential. Bank Director's 2024 Compensation and Talent Survey takes stock of bank leaders' views on succession planning, executive talent, and rising compensation cost. This article is written by Laura Alix, who's the Director of Research over at Bank Director. And it basically leads off by saying here that, bank leaders broadly have faith in their executive management team to lead the organization through the next 5 years, but many are also unclear about who will be leading the bank in the longer term. 40% of respondents to Bank Director's 2024 Compensation and Talent Survey say they expect their CEO to depart or retire within the next 5 years. That's a pretty good percentage. Just 18% of survey respondents have identified both a CEO succession candidate as well as a timeline and plan of action, while another 29% say they have identified one or more succession candidates, but not a timeline. Bank leaders who expect their CEO to depart within 2 years are clear about their timeline and succession candidate, but few of those who expect their CEO to leave within 3 to 5 years have identified possible succession candidates. Taken all together, the results suggest that many bank boards may need to take a more proactive role in succession planning for the CEO and other key C-suite roles. The survey findings also underscore the need for bank boards to take regular stock of their organization's talent and hold management accountable for its part in succession planning. Boards who are looking at a CEO change in the near future need to set a firm transition timeline and stick with it, he says. We too often see CEO succession timelines extend, which increases the likelihood the internal successor will be recruited away. So a large majority, 84% of survey respondents, say they believe the talent level of their executive team is strong enough to achieve their bank's financial and strategic goals over the next 5 years, even though many of those ostensibly expect their CEO to leave or retire in that time frame. And nearly half, 48% of respondents, also report their CEOs over 60 years of age. Now, being over 60 years of age, that's not in and of itself like necessarily a bad thing. If you think about it, like I believe the average age of a CEO is 56 years old, and that's generally about the time, about 55, 56 is generally when I would say most CEOs take over that job. So I mean, if you're 60 or 61 or 62, you may have only been in the job for 4 or 5 years, 6 years at that point. So it's not like a huge, it's not like the end of the world per se, but it certainly is something to keep an eye on. And obviously 48%, almost 50% of respondents saying their CEOs are over 60 years of age. Like that's, certainly something to take note of. 35% of bank executives and directors say they are looking at external candidates to fill key C-suite roles. So key findings. So cost to continue to climb, with a majority of 88% of survey respondents saying that compensation expenses increased from last year. Commercial banking carrots. So nearly half, 49% of respondents say their bank has implemented new incentives for commercial bankers to bring in new deposit accounts, compared with 42% who said as much last year. Another 22% say they're looking into it, while 26% say their bank does not do this. Declining interest in DEI. Fewer bank leaders say their organizations record some type of diversity, equity, inclusion metrics. Just over half say they measure the percentage of women, and 46% measure the percentage of minorities at different levels of the bank. Yes, and I would say after Disney gets the pantsuit off of them for all the stuff that's going on with them, I would say that the interest in DEI will drop to about zero at that point. So, and if anybody doesn't know, there's a whole thing going on with Disney right now and DEI and, what they aren't doing. I'll leave that to you to go. I'm not going to get into it. You can research that one on your own. There's plenty of information out there on the web about that right now. Okay, worth the effort. 66% of board chairs, lead directors, and independent directors believe they are fairly compensated in their role as a director, given the time and responsibility required. Hiring pressures fade. Just 39% of bank leaders say it was more difficult for their bank to hire and retain talent in 23 and 24 than it was a year earlier, compared with 56% who said the same last year. And that would make sense. I mean, I think the labor market has definitely been cooling. And I think a lot of banks have been reporting that, while hiring is still challenging, it's definitely not as challenging as it has been over the last couple of years with the kind of the great, I heard somebody say the other day, like the great resignation has turned into the great, I'm keeping pat right at my job. So it's kind of interesting. All right. So then we have the C-suite strength. So 59% believe their bank has a strong bench of talent to prepare for C-suite roles in the next 5 years. But 52% also say they don't expect to have to fill any C-suite roles in 24 or 25. So bank service members, it just says, can access a deeper look. So we just have some of the key findings here. And now we're going to go into the report itself. So this is the 2024 Compensation and Talent Survey here. This was sponsored by Chartwell Partners, which is an executive search and leadership advisory firm. And so I want to skim down here to, again, key findings, like what we just talked about, costs continue to climb. Commercial banking carrots, hiring pressures fade, declining interest DEI, worth the effort, C-suite strength, attracting and retaining talent. Again, same thing we kind of hit on here. What are your top 3 compensation and talent challenges for 2024? 58% said managing compensation and benefit costs. 41% said tying compensation to performance. 39% said retaining key employee or key people. 37% offering competitive pay. 28% said succession planning for the CEO and or executives. 27% said recruiting commercial lenders. 24% recruiting younger talent. 12% is recruiting technology talent. 12% recruiting key executives. 9% enhancing our bank's reputation. 7% recruiting risk and compliance personnel, and then 1% recruiting other key roles. I will say I find some of these percentages a little interesting. Recruiting technology talent, 12%. I would have thought that would be a lot higher, just because of the cost of, number one, the cost of recruiting that talent, and then how in demand that talent is right now. I mean, every bank is looking for, people in all different facets of technology. So I'm kind of surprised that's only at 12%. Recruiting commercial lenders, 27%. That seems a little low to me. I would think that might be more like in the 40% range. It's kind of interesting. Let's see what else here. And then I think, everything else seems kind of reasonable there outside of that. On net, did your bank increase or decrease its total number of employees in 2023? Let's see here. 42% increased somewhat. 30% had no change. 24% decreased somewhat. We had 4% increased substantially. And then 1% decreased substantially. So, you still have over 50% that basically had no change or somewhat decreased, whereas you had about 46% that increased a little or a lot. So overall, what was the primary reason for your bank's decrease in headcount in 2023? 84% said our bank reduced staff in certain areas or chose not to replace certain roles following planned attrition, including retirements. And then 60% said we lost staff to competing banks or other companies in our markets and other unplanned departures. So that. So did your bank's overall compensation expense increase in fiscal year 2023? 88% said yes, absolutely. Costs are going up. I don't think there's any surprise there. Overall, by what percentage did your bank's compensation expense increase in fiscal year 2023? 7% was the median increase in compensation expense. What was your bank's total compensation expense in fiscal year 2023? The median compensation was $9.2 million. In which areas do you expect your bank to increase staff in 2024? Commercial business lending, 57%, technology, IT, risk compliance, branch, cybersecurity, audit, accounting, mortgage lending, 15%, wealth asset management, call center, human resources, and marketing. And obviously the biggest ones there, 57% for commercial business lending. Now, why is that? If you're not, again, if you're not in if you're in the banking business, you understand why. But if you're not in the banking business, or if you're just watching maybe one of my videos for the first time, which would be great, the so you have 56. So basically, commercial lenders are, they are a income driver for the bank. They're the ones who are the relationship managers. They're the ones bringing loans into the bank, and loans are the primary asset of the bank. Banks earn the interest off those loans every month, off those loan payments, and that's really what drives a major part of the income for the bank. So they are growth, income, revenue drivers, and obviously that's why they'd be number one on the list. Technology, IT, 37%. Again, no surprise there, just because you got so much that you have to manage today with websites, infrastructure. You got hardware, software, vendor management, the whole kit and caboodle there. And then again, risk compliance, no surprise there, because you've got so much going on. Now there's a lot in risk compliance. Part of that could be IT, like cybersecurity. But a lot of that is going to be kind of like your back office compliance. You're going to have your BSA, Bank Secrecy Act, your AML, anti-money laundering. You're going to have you're going to have the bank security officer, perhaps the chief risk officer. Like there could be a lot of different parts of that risk compliance area. So, okay, has your bank implemented any new incentives to entice commercial bankers to bring in new deposit accounts? 49% said yes. 26% said no, we have not offered. 22% said no, but we're looking into it. And then 3% said they were unsure. So obviously 50% of banks are basically saying that, yeah, we're now enticing people to go and bring deposits back in the door. And it's very interesting. A couple of years ago, with all the pandemic funding, banks were just absolutely flush with deposits. And, now we've seen this shift where, banks are basically back in the deposit gathering mode, where it's basically like, hey, we need to get back out there and we need to start, bringing more deposits back in the door there. And then I'll kind of wrap up with this last one. There's obviously a lot more here, but does the bank measure any of the following when evaluating its DEI progress or initiatives? 51% of women at different levels of the bank, 46% of minorities at different levels of the bank, 42% we lack a formal DEI program and don't measure these metrics, and 29% of veterans at different levels of the bank, and then 24% was gender pay gap. And then, I'm sorry, I'll do one more. C-suite pay and succession, number 11. The CEO at my bank received the following types of compensation in fiscal year 2023. So 100% got salary, 74% got some type of cash bonus, cash incentive, 60% got other benefits and perks, which could be, a car, country club membership, that kind of thing. 50% equity grants, 46% got non-qualified deferred compensation and or retirement benefits, and 24% got synthetic equity grants, so cash-based long-term incentives. So very interesting. So, obviously a lot more there that you could go through here in the risk survey, but again, I think really good, really solid information there. If we go back, again, we can look at basically, costs continue to climb. But the hiring pressures are fading. A lot of banks feel like they have a lot of C-suite strength, but there is some concern about the number of CEOs that are aging, the number of CEOs that say they're retiring in the next 5 years, the succession planning, the bench strength, so to speak. So there is some concern there with that. Commercial banking carrots. Obviously, they're 49% of banks are saying that they're implementing new initiatives for bankers to bring deposits in the door, and there is declining interest in DEI. And boards and everything are basically saying that they are being fairly compensated. That it's worth the effort and the time that they're putting into this. So if you are interested in looking at either this article or the survey itself, I do have links below, so you can go and click on those and check them out. I would always recommend you to go and check out Bank Director at bankdirector.com. It's a fantastic website with tons of articles and resources, and they do put out a quarterly banking magazine, which is a very, very, very good publication. So definitely, go check that out. But I'll wrap this up by saying, if you like this episode, please make sure to like, share, and subscribe. That always helps the channel. Please check us out on YouTube, Rumble, and all major podcast platforms. Please make sure to leave your comments down below, and I'll be back to you guys again real soon. Thanks a lot.